He found his wife cheating. The man she cheated with came to threaten him on his own lawn. He said nothing, just walked inside. 30 minutes later, the police were at his door, and the man who once mocked him was begging for mercy. But that was only the beginning of a revenge so calculated, it ruined their careers, exposed their lies in court, and left them trapped in a life they destroyed themselves. Let's begin. Ryan Matthews had always believed in systems. Systems at work, systems in relationships, systems in life. As a senior logistics analyst for a distribution chain in Minnesota, he built a world of predictability, routine, and calm. Soccer games on Sundays, home-cooked meals, weekend trips to the co-op. And most of all, Deborah, his wife of 12 years. A woman he believed to be steady, loyal, and just as committed to the life they built. Until everything shattered. It started with whispers in the dark. Deborah, 36, started staying late at the office. At first, Ryan didn't question it. She was a marketing manager. Late hours happened. But then there were hushed phone calls, luxury lingerie tucked deep into drawers, perfume he hadn't smelled on her before. Ryan, 38, ignored the signs, telling himself the storm was just in his head. That belief broke the day he came home early with a migraine and found her in bed with Giih Morato. Jason was 40, the kind of man who walked like he expected the world to part for him. A sales executive at Deborah's company, all charm and arrogance. Ryan didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He simply turned around, walked out, and said 4 words with terrifying calm. Get out. Both of you. They left, and silence replaced 12 years of marriage. For 2 days, Ryan stayed in the house alone, drifting in and out of disbelief, anger, sorrow. But on Saturday, while mowing his front lawn, desperate to feel something normal again, the black Audi A7 pulled into his driveway. Jason stepped out, dressed casually, confidently, like he was about to negotiate a lease rather than talk to the husband of the woman he was sleeping with. You're going to give Deborah an easy divorce, Jason said, hands in pockets. No drama, no lawyers. You won't touch her money. She deserves to be happy. We deserve to be happy. It was a threat wrapped in smugness, cloaked in the illusion of reason. But Ryan didn't respond. He left the mower running, walked back into the house, and shut the door. What Jason didn't know was that Ryan had cameras. High-definition, audio-backed, cloud-sync security footage, clear as day. The entire threat, recorded. Ryan didn't call 911. He filed a report. Quiet, methodical, ruthless. By nightfall, the police were calling Jason. By the next day, Jason was panicked, begging Ryan to take it back. Ryan didn't. Jason's voice was no longer calm, no longer superior, no longer cocky. On the phone, he sounded like a man whose pedestal had crumbled beneath him. You have no idea who you're messing with, Jason spat. This is going to blow back on you. Withdraw the complaint. Say it was a misunderstanding. Ryan had never raised his voice, not even when he found them in bed. But now, standing in his kitchen with a mug of black coffee in hand, he simply said, "Talk to a lawyer," and ended the call. That was the moment Jason realized something terrifying. Ryan wasn't just angry. He was organized. Deborahs' response came 2 days later. Not in person, but through furious texts and unhinged voicemails. You're ruining Jason's life. He was trying to have a conversation. You're being petty, vindictive. This is why we fell apart, Ryan. You always played the victim. Grow up. There was no apology, no remorse, only entitlement. And so, Ryan did what he was best at, documenting everything. Every call, every message, every threat, cataloged into a spreadsheet with timestamps, backups, and summaries. His lawyer, Timothy Grant, was a stoic, steel-nerved man who read through everything and nodded. We're not going to fight with words, he said. We'll fight with proof. Let their own actions speak. The divorce papers were filed, served to Deborah at Jason's apartment. And from there, the real battle began. Jason tried to flip the narrative. He called it a misunderstood conversation. His lawyer, a high-priced firm downtown, sent a letter filled with puffed-up legalese threatening a defamation suit and demanding Ryan retract his complaint. Ryan forwarded it to Timothy, who responded with a single line. This is what guilty people do. We ignore it. But Jason wasn't done. A month later, Ryan received notice. Jason had filed for a restraining order. The grounds? He and Deborah were in fear for their safety. Included was a blurry photo of Ryan's Honda Accord parked on a public street near Jason's apartment, claiming he was stalking them. Ryan's chest tightened. How do you prove you weren't somewhere? He was in a quarterly meeting that afternoon. But that wasn't enough. Then it hit him, the telematics device in his car. Installed years ago to lower his insurance rate. It tracks speed, braking, and most importantly, location. Timothy filed for a subpoena. 2 weeks later, certified data arrived. Crystal clear GPS logs showed Ryan's car never left his office garage that day. From engine off at 8:17 a.m. to back on at 5:15 p.m., the vehicle was still, dead still. 3 colleagues signed sworn affidavits confirming his presence in the meeting. The restraining order hearing arrived. Deborah and Jason sat side by side, whispering and smirking. Their lawyers stood and laid out their shaky story. Then Timothy rose. In a voice calm as winter rain, he handed the judge GPS logs, timestamps, affidavits, proof stacked like dominoes. Jason's lawyer turned white. Deborah's hands clenched into fists. Jason began shifting in his seat like the floor beneath him had turned to fire. The judge glanced at the evidence, then back at Jason. You claim the respondent was stalking you, she said, voice slow and sharp. But these records prove he was 7 miles away, in a corporate meeting, while his car sat parked all day. Are you lying to this court, Mr. Rowe? The courtroom fell silent. Jason's lawyer stammered. The judge wasn't moved. The restraining order was denied. The tables turned. But what came next would be worse, for both Deborah and Jason. Because the judge didn't stop there. She referred the case for a criminal investigation, filing a false police report, perjury, conspiracy. Their lie had officially become a felony. And Ryan, silent, calm, methodical Ryan, hadn't even broken a sweat. The courtroom doors swung open with a dull thud as Deborah and Jason walked out, their expressions hollow and drained. They didn't speak to the reporters waiting outside. There were no declarations of innocence, just silence. Ryan, however, didn't wait to see them leave. He walked the opposite way, briefcase in hand, nodding silently to Timothy. A quiet signal between 2 men who understood the game wasn't over. Not yet. The legal wheels began turning faster than Deborah or Jason had anticipated. The judge's referral landed on the desk of the district attorney's office within days, triggering a full investigation. For weeks, subpoenas were issued, interviews were conducted, evidence reviewed. And Ryan, always meticulous, cooperated with unwavering precision. During those weeks, the social facade Deborah had worked so hard to protect began to splinter. Friends who once invited her to brunch, colleagues who once laughed with her during team meetings, all began to distance themselves as whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs turned into truths no one could ignore. Her version of the story, that Ryan was cold, controlling, incapable of love, was starting to unravel. At the same time, Jason's world began to crumble in quieter, more brutal ways. His employer, once proudly listing him on their website as one of their top executives, placed him on immediate administrative leave. Officially, they cited ongoing legal proceedings. Unofficially, his behavior was now a reputational liability. Clients stopped returning his calls. Partners began to express concerns. His polished Audi A7 sat and used in the garage, the payments stacking like bricks on a crumbling foundation. But Ryan wasn't focused on their unraveling. He had his own life to restructure. Mornings were early now. A cup of black coffee at 6:15. A jog through the trail near Lake Nokomis by 6:45. Then therapy at 8 a.m. every Thursday, a place where he began to unpack more than just betrayal. He unpacked the years of emotional neglect he had refused to name, the way Deborah's love had slowly turned conditional, the way he had become invisible in his own marriage. I kept trying to earn her love, Ryan told his therapist one day, as if it were a paycheck. Like if I just did more, worked harder, she'd see me again. The therapist, a quiet woman named Elise, simply nodded and said, "Sometimes people see only what reflects their own value. If they can't see yours, it doesn't mean it's not there." Her words echoed in Ryan's mind long after he left. Meanwhile, the legal updates kept coming. 3 months after the judge's referral, the DA filed charges. Jason and Deborah were formally charged with filing a false police report and conspiracy to commit perjury. Deborah's name, once respected in marketing circles, was now associated with a criminal docket number. Jason's attorney, faced with overwhelming evidence, began negotiating a plea deal. Jason eventually pled guilty to uttering threats and filing a false report. The heavier charges were dropped, but only because of the strength of Ryan's documented evidence. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, ordered to attend a year-long anger management program, and fined heavily. He now carried a permanent criminal record, something that would follow him in every job interview, every financial application, every new chapter he dared to write. Deborah, meanwhile, was offered a pretrial diversion program as a first-time offender. She avoided conviction, but the charges remained on her record, available for scrutiny by any employer or landlord who cared to look. And they did care. The social freefall began. The friend she once confided in now returned her calls with clipped politeness or not at all. At work, whispers followed her through the hallways like shadows, subtle, constant. She wasn't fired, but when the promotion she'd been eyeing for over a year was given to someone newer, someone less controversial, she understood the message. But the true reckoning came in the divorce courtroom. Timothy presented everything: her affair, her attempts at legal manipulation, her financial demands, and decimated her credibility. She had asked for 60% of the home equity, spousal support, and half of Ryan's retirement. She got none of it. The judge cited her behavior as economically malicious and strategically dishonest, ruling that she had forfeited her standing as a good faith party. Ryan kept the house, bought out her reduced share, and was awarded partial reimbursement for his legal fees from Deborah's own settlement. The woman who once laughed in his face and told him she deserved happiness now stood beside a man stripped of title, car, and influence, facing a future they had tried to build on lies and manipulation. They were together still, but it wasn't love holding them. It was shame, survival, and the twisted solidarity of two people who had gambled their integrity and lost. Ryan, on the other hand, returned to a quiet house that no longer echoed pain. He repainted the bedroom, bought a new set of furniture, donated the bed where betrayal was discovered. Every small change was a reclaiming, not just of space, but of self. He never sought revenge. He sought peace. And through patience, truth, and quiet resilience, he found it. The first night Ryan slept on his new bed, there was no celebration, just silence. No champagne, no triumphant playlist, just the soft creak of clean sheets and the gentle hum of the air conditioning. But for the first time in over a year, he didn't wake up with tension in his chest. He slept without dreaming of courtrooms, lawyers, or her voice echoing through a phone, accusing him of being the villain. Piece of sound now. It was the rustling of leaves outside his window, the crackle of a fire pit on Friday evenings, the chirp of his phone, messages from people who had stayed, friends who had seen him through the wreckage and never once asked, "But did you try to fix it?" They knew. He had. The divorce was finalized under a judge's gavel and the weight of truth. The final decree cemented what the journey had taught. Deborah and Jason's downfall wasn't a tragic mistake. It was a choice. A sequence of selfish decisions driven by ego and arrogance. They believed Ryan would fold, that his silence was weakness. But it wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Calculated. Strategic. Lethal. The judge awarded Ryan everything he had asked for: his home, protection from Jason, and the dignity of walking out of court not as the victim, but as the man who endured, responded with integrity, and prevailed. The fallout for Deborah and Jason didn't end with legal consequences. They had become pariahs in their once thriving circles. Ryan learned, through Amy, one of the few mutual friends who still spoke to both sides, that Jason had been forced to break his Audi lease and move out of their sleek downtown apartment. With no stable job and a criminal record, Jason found himself in a small, dated rental across town. His days of power lunches and corporate networking had vanished. Nobody in his field wanted to touch him. Deborah had to face a different kind of decay. Her office environment turned cold. Her name, once floated in leadership meetings, was now only whispered in hushed tones and not with admiration. The promotion that seemed guaranteed slipped through her fingers like sand. Her supervisor, once her mentor, stopped inviting her to strategy sessions. Isolation grew, first professionally, then socially. Eventually, She stopped attending work events altogether. Their love, once described with breathless excitement as liberating and meant to be, was now trapped in 4 beige walls, surrounded by overdue bills, legal binders, and the echo of what they'd lost. They had ruined their lives for each other, and the shine was gone. Ryan, however, had no interest in their misery. He didn't follow Deborah's social media. He didn't ask Amy for updates. If people volunteered information, he listened, but he didn't dwell. He had lost enough nights to their betrayal. Now he was rebuilding. Every Saturday morning, he took his kayak out on a Lake Nokomis. He had never been one for hobbies, but there was something therapeutic about slicing through water as the sun rose. He found stillness in movement. He went to therapy consistently, working through the guilt, the questions, the silent regrets. Elise, his therapist, helped him unpack the pieces of himself he had given away slowly over years of neglect. The way he shrank to avoid conflict. The way he had tolerated apathy and convinced himself it was stability. You didn't lose her, Elise had said during one of their sessions. You finally saw her for who she always was. The weight of that truth was liberating. Ryan began to see how much of his life he had lived in the shadows of someone else's needs. Someone who weaponized his silence, who viewed his kindness as currency, someone who thought loyalty meant compliance. Now, he moved differently. He reconnected with old friends, made new ones. He went out, not often, not recklessly, but enough to feel human again, enough to smile without guilt. One evening, while sitting on the dock, watching the sky darken, Amy joined him for a quiet chat. She had been the one who never chose sides blindly. She had stayed present, supportive, without giving in to gossip. I heard she's trying to move on, Amy said gently, testing the waters. Ryan shrugged. Let her. You don't hate her? She asked. Ryan paused. I did, for a long time, but hating her kept me tied to her. I'd rather let her go and keep my peace. Amy smiled. You've changed. He nodded. No, I just stopped pretending I was okay being invisible. And with that, they sat quietly, 2 friends watching the stars blink into place, the way you do when the past no longer owns you. Ryan didn't win by destroying them. He won by surviving them. Autumn arrived with gold leaves and sharp winds, and for Ryan Matthews, it felt like the first real season of change. Not just around him, but inside him. The courtroom drama had ended, the lies had been exposed, and the dust had settled. Yet, what remained wasn't some cinematic triumph or emotional high. It was clarity. Jason and Deborah had settled into a life forged from scandal and decay. The gravity of their actions never left them. Deborah, once a rising star in the marketing world, had watched her influence shrink to whispers and uncomfortable glances. She wasn't fired, but she may as well have been exiled. When she walked into meetings, the room stiffened. When she offered ideas, her team avoided eye contact. And while she stayed at the company out of necessity, it was obvious to everyone she was no longer trusted. She had become the living cautionary tale of corporate gossip. Jason's fall had been even steeper. His plea deal spared him prison, but not shame. His former colleagues deleted his contact from their phones. The luxury client accounts he once boasted about were reassigned to younger, hungrier salesmen. The executive circles that once welcomed him shut their doors. With his criminal record now public, even consulting work became nearly impossible. He tried to launch a startup once, some low-effort online venture, but investors walked away the moment his name surfaced in background checks. He was radioactive. Amy, still Ryan's quiet source of insight into their world, once ran into them at a grocery store. She said Deborah looked tired, wearing a worn coat that didn't fit. Jason's swagger had faded. He looked smaller, like a man whose ego had collapsed in on itself. They didn't even look at me, Amy had said softly, like they were trying to disappear. But Ryan didn't take joy in that. Not really. The satisfaction wasn't in watching them fall. It was in realizing that he had risen without stepping over anyone. His revenge hadn't been fire and chaos. It had been truth, patience, and strategy. It had been letting the facts speak. The day Ryan received the final letter from his attorney confirming that every legal thread was resolved, divorce closed, restraining order permanent, reimbursement processed, he took the afternoon off. He didn't throw a party. He didn't call anyone. He went to the lake. Just him, the kayak, and the silence. As he glided through the water, cool wind in his face, he reflected not on what had been taken from him, but on what he had reclaimed. His sense of self, his dignity, his calm. He thought about the man he used to be, a man who kept his head down, played the peacekeeper, accepted crumbs in the name of loyalty. That man was gone. He had been forged in the fire of betrayal and shaped by the slow, painful process of justice. And now, he was something new, not broken, not bitter, just better. Later that night, he wrote in his journal, a habit Elise encouraged during therapy. He had only written a few words, but they were enough. They mistook my silence for weakness. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought they could rewrite the story and leave me voiceless. But I never needed to shout. I only needed to show the truth. And that was enough. They're still trapped in their lie. I'm free. Ryan wasn't the kind of man who sought to punish. But when the time came, he didn't flinch. He stood his ground. He used evidence, not emotion. Resolve, not rage. And in the end, that made all the difference. He didn't destroy them. He let them destroy themselves. And now, for the first time in years, his life was truly his.